Hi folks, I thought I would make a quick recording to try to help out with the one of your assignments as well as just the ongoing efforts we're making here in the class. And I went over selecting and laying out sprinkler heads in a lecture a couple modules ago, and I wanted to go through an example with you to hopefully help make that process more straightforward. So if you remember selecting heads, you have to consider a couple of things like the size and the shape of the turf and turf areas or whatever ornamental areas you have, whether or not there are any obstructions, available water and working pressure, and so on. So these general things to keep in mind. So those are the things that I went over in the lecture on the topic. And if you recall, we kind of looked at this example from the textbook and talked about, how you consider what sorts of heads you would choose. And for example, in this longer and narrower area, you would most likely choose spray heads because of the dimensions. And likewise, in this larger area, you would most likely choose rotors so that you could minimize the number of sprinklers but still get the area covered. So those are some general things. And we also talked about labeling the drawing in a way like this, where you're saying, all right, this area is probably going to be spray heads, this area is probably going to be rotors, and so on. This area is probably going to be spray heads. And that's the exact process you would go through with any plan that you were working on. Now, in the example from the text, what they ended up with after having gone through this process of determining what types of sprinklers would be installed where, they went ahead and drew those on the plan and had a legend where they were designating these circles as spray heads, these hexagons as rotors, and these squares as pop-up shrub sprays. And they went ahead and drew those in on the plan. And your assignment asked you to do the same thing for this particular plan. And obviously this is much simpler, but that's okay. You have to start somewhere. And I just wanted to go through a couple of sort of the process that I go through so you can see how you might do it. Let's see. So as I'm looking at this plan, and I asked you in the assignment to assume that the entire area was turf grass, and this is not a very detailed plan, obviously, but what the blank area here symbolizes is the landscaped area. And then this particular area is most likely a structure of some type of home, perhaps. And then this is probably a driveway or something like that, okay? So those are my initial thoughts when I'm looking at this particular plan. Then, like I said, I'm going to assume for the purposes of this particular example that all of the landscaped area is turf. So I'm just kind of looking around here, and just like in the example from the textbook, I'd be thinking, all right, what are these different areas going to be irrigated with? Now, down here in the bottom it says that the scale is 1 inch equals 20 feet. So what that means is that this area, and hold on just a second here, I've actually made some measurements of that area, but it's roughly 105 by 50 feet as I'm working from the paper in my hands. So yours might be slightly different from that depending on the printout that you may have used and so forth. But the point is that this area is rather large, and so it's pretty likely I'll be using rotors to cover that area. Next, I'm going to go through the same process on all these different areas. Next, I might look at this area here. Now, obviously that's a very long and narrow area, and in my measurements it ends up being roughly 120 feet by 19 or 20 feet. So I could technically use small rotors there, but I could also use spray heads, and I'm going to go ahead and envision using spray heads there. Okay, so let's see. I want to cover the areas that we've already discussed. So spray heads over here and rotors back here. So what have I got left? Well, I basically look for the biggest squares and rectangles that I can find first. That's kind of how I block the areas off. I've got another pretty big area right here. And in my measurements, it works out to be about 84 by 65 feet, something along those lines. So that would be another large area that would be appropriate for using rotors. What have I got left? The only thing I've got left is, let's see if I can get this, is this small area here. And it ends up being about 30 by 36 feet. And it's slightly rectangular more than square, and so I know I'm probably going to be using spray heads to cover the area simply because it's fairly small. So that's my initial thought process with this particular plan. So then what I went ahead and did was I took the plan and I just started playing around with it and drawing in sprinklers. Now, you recall I said I'd use rotors back here, and I have. Rotors here, and I have. And I've also designated this area as spray or small rotor, and then sprays here. Okay. Now, hopefully you're asking yourself, all right, that makes sense. Rotors in larger areas, sprays in smaller areas, and that's fine. But how do I determine exactly where to place these sprinklers? And a lot of that has to do with the measurement of the area and also what I can find in different manufacturers' catalogs and information about their products. So for me, the process that I've gone through is this is what I've ended up with as a plan, but how did I determine the spacing of these particular heads, for example? All right, so let's look at that. Now, what I've done is scanned some images from obviously this is a Rainbird catalog, and these product catalogs are available from the manufacturers. You can sometimes get them at irrigation distribution stores, but I think it's also important to note that you can find every single bit of this information online as well. So you may not have a paper catalog in front of you, but you can still get access to all of this information, and certainly not just for Rainbird, but for any manufacturer, Hunter, Toro, Irasoft, you name it. They're all available online. So don't worry that you don't have a paper catalog in front of you. I'm just using this as an example. So what I have done is what I did was I just literally looked through the catalog and I started paying very close attention to radius of throw, which will be listed among the features for the various sprinklers that the company has. So I was looking for sprinklers that could work in this particular area, and as I mentioned, my measurements indicated that it's about 19 feet by 120 feet, and so I was looking at this particular sprinkler, and it's a rotary nozzle. It kind of works for a lot of different, let's see, I want to make this a little bit bigger if I can. Make it even bigger. Works for lots of different applications, but I was looking at this and thinking, all right, this particular radius of throw could work for a couple of different areas in the plan that we're working on. So it could work for these particular sprinklers, and it could also work for these particular sprinklers. And again, I just looked at the different radius of throw that was listed, and I chose these particular sprinklers because I could get the area covered. Something else to make a note of is that you might not find a sprinkler that has exactly the correct radius of throw that you want, but you should know that a lot of these are adjustable. What this text says, if you can't read it very well, is that there's a radius reduction screw on top of the nozzle that allows you to reduce the radius of throw significantly. In this case, what it's saying is that you could take the 17-foot radius nozzle and using that adjustment screw get it all the way down to 13 feet. So my suggestion there would be, all right, use a nozzle that's a little bit bigger than you need, and then do some fine tuning with the adjustment screw on top. Okay, so you have some flexibility there. So then the other, let's see, let's get this back in view. The other areas that I needed to consider were this large area with rotors and this large area with rotors. So again, all I did was look through the catalog, and let me just back up for a second. It's a little bit hard to see in my hand drawing here, but these center sprinklers are full circles. Then I've got half, 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 quarter, half, quarter, half, 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 quarter, half, quarter. Okay, so I've got head-to-head coverage with these sprinklers in the same sort of scenario here. So I literally just started looking through the catalog and finding sprinklers with a nozzle of throw that would work for my particular plan. Now, based on my layout here, I've got roughly 25 feet here, roughly 25 feet here. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's close. Here, these are roughly 21 feet by 21 feet. And so, again, I've gone to this particular sprinkler. Let me blow that up for you. And you can see that the radius throw is 25, about 25 feet, goes down to 23 depending on the pressure. But again, these can be adjusted. The radius of throw can be adjusted. So for this, let me get this the right scale again. For this particular area in the back, where it's 25 by 25, these sprinklers are going to work well. I mean, their radius of throw is 25 feet. For these particular sprinklers, where it's more like 21 by 21, these are still going to be okay, because I'm going to go ahead and use them and then adjust that radius downward to get head-to-head coverage in this area. Okay, so that's the process that I have gone through to set up this particular head layout. Now, I think it's really important for you guys to understand that this is just one way to approach this particular plan. The good and bad thing about irrigation design is that there's no absolutely correct way to do it, or there's no one perfect answer. There are lots of approaches to even just this simple plan. This is just the one that I chose. Okay, you could do something entirely different and it would be just fine. But I wanted you to see or hear from me about the process that I went through. I like to leave you with a little food for thought at the end, and hopefully this has been helpful in working on that assignment and keeping the design process in mind. But you got to remember, there's going to be iterations, and this process is all about the iterations, and you're going to revisit your head placement and your lateral placement and all of those things again and again until you arrive at what you think is a good solution for the particular plan you're working on. Okay, hopefully that helps.